Hey there, how's it going everyone? This is part 2 series of videos in which we're going to create a full stack of application using the Flask framework and React.js. So in the last video, we went ahead and set up our API. We also created two models, which were the recipe model as well as the user model. We created the user model to help us to create the login and sign up functionality. And in this video, we are going to go ahead and implement that. So for the sign up functionality, we're going to be making use of some existing functionality. For example, signing up a user. We are going to be making use of our user model, which we created in the last video. And we're also going to implement things like password hashing. Now for the login, we are going to use JWT Authentication. Now right here in my Chrome, I have Flask-JWT's extended documentation. Now, this is the package that you're going to be using to implement things like JWT authentication. JWT authentication is the mechanism we're going to use to authenticate our users on our front end. They're going to see. So to get started, I'm going to head back to Visual Studio Code. I'm going to check if we have Flask-JWT extended installed. So if I go to my requirements.txt file, let me try to check. So we have it already installed, so we shall not need to install it. So I'm going to just close this for now. Now the first thing we're going to do is to register our application to use JWT authentication. But before I do that, let's actually first implement the route that's going to help us to log in our users. So you need to come right here and I'm going to implement those routes. So I'm going to call the first route, which say at API route. So in this case, it's going to be slash sign up. So after signing up, I'll create a class and this class is going to be a sign up. So I'll just call this sign up and then it will inherit from source. And then I'll create the simple view function, which is going to be a post method. And it's going to take in the self. And then we're going to just pass for now. Then I also create the one for login. So I'll say at API dot route. Then I'll say slash login. After this, I'm going to say class. This is going to be our login. It's going to inherit from source. And then after this, I'll also create a method, which is going to be a post method. Then it's going to take in the self, and then we shall pass this for now. Now, the sign up route is the one that's going to help us to create our user accounts, and the login route is the one that's going to help us to carry out the JWT authentication. So let's start with the sign up route. So I'm going to start by importing our user model. So you need to go to the top of our code, and from where we have models import recipe, we are also going to import the user model. After doing this, the next thing is going to be to come to our sign up route, and the first thing we shall need to access is the data from our client or our Swagger UI. So one thing that we forgot to do in the last video is to suggest the data that our API may expect from Swagger UI. Now, while using flask-restx, we always use the at API.expect decorator, and then we pass in the model or the serializer that we created. Now, for when we are creating a model, we did not try to carry that out when we are trying to create a recipe. So to do that, I'm just going to come and decorate this view function with at API.expect and we pass in the recipe model. I'm going to just come and decorate this with at API.expect and I'll pass in the recipe model. Now when I save and try to go back to our Swagger UI, so let me hope the server is still running. So we have an indentation error here. Let's try to fix that. So let's try to fix this indentation error. So we try to fix this. So I'll come here and try to first close this for now. So try to go where that error is. So this is actually, let me put a simple pass statement right here. and hope that's going to fix it. So I'm going to run my server again, and we have recipe model. So it's supposed to be the recipe model. So we'll go back to our post method right here, and this is going to be our recipe model. So when we pull our server, when we run our server again, we are going to go back to our Swagger UI and try to see if we can be able to post from the Swagger UI. So I'm going to go back to my localhost 5000. So I'm going to open up localhost 5000, and then we're going to go to the docs. So it's on /docs, just like we specified. So it's going to bring up our Swagger UI. So when I open up our default namespace, so namespaces are like how you see blueprint. So in this case, we have one namespace, but we shall organize our API namespaces as we go on. So we have the login and the sign up. So these are already created for us. Now, when you go to our post request, we can be able to see the payload. So basically at API.expect helps us to suggest the payload or the data that you may pass in to go to the server, data we may send to the server. So in this case, if we say try it out, we already have fields that are already suggested for us. So let's go back to our API. So I'm going to go back to Visual Studio Code, and within our code, I'm going to go back to the sign up route that we created. So right here, we are supposed to create a model that's going to specify the fields of the data that you may pass in to sign up a user. So I need to go right here. I'm going to create a sign up model. So I'm going to call this sign up model. And this is going to be our API dot model. And the first thing we shall specify is the name of that model. So the name of the model, if we check here, when we see models, let me try to maximize this. So when I give a model, it will appear right here. So we have the recipe and then the fields. So in this case, I'm going to suggest the name as sign up. So this is going to be the sign up. And then I'll just come right here and then specify the fields that we shall need to sign up a user. Sign up a user, we're going to require a username. So username. And this is going to be fields dot string. And then the next thing is going to be our email. So our email is also going to be a string. So I'm going to say fields dot string. Now the next thing is going to be our password. So I'll say password is going to be fields dot string. After this is done, I'm going to come and try to decorate our view function to help us to expect this data as well as to serialize the response as our newly created user. When I come right here, I'm going to just come to this post method and then decorate it at API.expect. So this is going to be at API.expect. Then I'll pass in the sign up model. After I've done this, the next thing is going to be to carry out the logic that's going to sign up our user. So you need to come right here. I'm going to remove this path statement. And the first thing we're going to do is to access the data that may be sent with any client. So to do that, we shall just create a variable. So we need to just come right here and create a variable called data. Now this variable is going to be having all the data in the request object, but in form of JSON. So we shall say data is equal to request.getJSON. Now if you're wondering where this request object is got, this request object is got from Flask. So where I said from Flask import request. So this request object has the data that we send from the client when we are doing a post method. So when you get this data, the next thing is going to be to get the various fields from this data, such as the username, the password, and the email. So I'm going to create a new user. So I'll say new user. And our new user is going to be a user object. So a user with a username of, so our username is going to be the value of our data from username. So I'll say data dot get username. And then the next thing is going to be our email. So I'll say email is going to be data dot get email. And then for the password, we are not going to create a string of a password. Or what we shall do is to hash this password, and then we shall save the hashed password in our database. So you're going to say password is going to be equal to. So what I'll do in this case is to make use of a password hashing algorithm. Now we can make use of some existing password hashing by WorkZoog. So WorkZoog is a tool that helps us to build web applications. It provides some of the tools that help to build Flask. So Flask depends on WorkZoog. And even if we went and checked in our requirements, the txt file, when we installed Flask, it helped us to install WorkZoog. So we're going to be making use of WorkZoog module for security, which contains the various methods or the various functions that help us to check and hash passwords. I need to go right to our main.py, and I'm going to import. Uh, so I'm going to say from WorkZoog dot security. Sorry for this. So this is going to be security. I'm going to import generate password hash, and then check password hash. So I'm going to give you an example of how these two functions work. I'm going to first go back and try to correct the error I'm having currently. So just block this. So I'll just call this that, then block it for now. So after doing this, I'll just say pass so as to prevent syntax errors. So after doing this, I'm going to pull up a terminal right here, and then open up our Python shell. So when I open up this shell, I'm going to create a simple password. So I'll say password going to be equal to a password, a string that represents our password. I'm going to import our hashing algorithm. I'm going to say from workzone.security. I'm going to import generate. So this is going to be generate password hash, and then check password hash. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to generate our password hash for that password hash. So for that password that we have here, we're going to call this password hash is going to be equal to generate password hash, and then I'll pass in the password. So this is going to be our password. So in a all password hash, so it's going to give us a hashed password. Now this is the string that we shall save, and then we shall save this in our database and then be able to check the various passwords on login if they match with this password. So let's make use of a check password function. So to do that, I'm going to say check password hash. So I'll say check password hash, and then in this case, I'll pass in a password hash. So I'll say pwd hash, and then our password. So in this case, I may say password. So this returns true, meaning that our password matches the hash. So this is basically the logic that we use when creating our creating our password hashes and being able to log in with our passwords. I'm going to close this, and after closing this, then I'm going to run the server again. So because I have an error, it's not going to run. So let's fix that. So for the password, I'm going to say generate password hash, and then I'll pass in data.get password. So this is going to hash whatever string we get for password. So say password. Now, since this is done, I'm going to also add a comma here. So hoping that everything is now good. So close this, and we are done with creating our user object. So the next thing is going to be to save this user object to our database. If I go back to my models, we never created any convenience method. Oh, it's here. So we created db.session.addSelf, which adds the current object to the database session and then commits it to the database. So when you go back to our main.py, we shall instead say new user dot save. Now this is just enough to save this user to our database. Now we may also want to carry out some logic that helps us to check if this user exists. So to do that, I'm just going to come and make a database query for a user. If that user exists, then we throw an exception. So to do that, I'm just going to come right here. So I'll come and say username going to be equal to data dot get, and we shall say our username. So we have got this username from the data that has come as JSON from our clients. So when you get this data, what you may want to do is to carry out a database query that checks if this user exists. And then if that user exists, we do not create that user, we just actually return an exception. So to do that, I'm just going to say user, actually I'll call this db user, then carry out a database query. So I'll say user dot query. So in this case, I'm going to use a filter. So I'll say dot filter, and then I'll say username equal to username. Then I'll say dot past. So then I'll use an if statement. So I'll say if db user is not null. So if it's not null, if it's not none, so if it's none, then it will return, and if it's none, then we are going to actually just carry out this logic of saving the new user. If it's not none, then we shall just actually return an error. So in this case, we're going to say return. We shall just return a JSONify. So I'm going to import JSONify from Flask. Come to the top of the code right here, and then say from Flask import JSONify. So we shall say return JSONify, and then we shall just give a simple error message. So we shall say message is going to be equal to user with username. So let's also make this an F string so that we specify the username. So we shall say user with username, username already exists. So we're going to say already exists. Now after this is done, we expect that if we have a user who has that username existing, we're going to throw this message. Now we also have an email. So when we check our models, we have our username. That's the only unique object, the only unique field on our database. So when you go back to our main.py, we are going to return a simple success message. So in this case, I'll say return, and then we can return our new user, but we never specified the serializer we're going to use, because when you use expect, we are actually making a description of the fields that you want to pass in data while we are passing it to the API. So we are going to also add that API dot measure width. So this is going to be measure width. Then we pass in our sign up module. This is going to be sign up module. So adding this is going to help us to serialize the new user object in JSON and then return it to us. So when I come right here, I'll say return new user and then status code of 201. So let's try to check this. So when I save this, hoping that our server is going to run. So when I run, so we see that, oh, I made a certain mistake. So let me fix that. It comes from Flask import request. When I pull up our server, if the string username is not defined, I wonder why I'm doing this mistake a lot. So I'm going to put this in quotes. These fields should be strings. So just come and say email. Same thing for the password. When I save this and run our server again, so our server is going to run. So when we go to our API, so I'm going to go to my Insomnia, which is the testing tool I'm using. So I'll create a new request. And in this new request, I'll say sign up. So I'm going to just call it sign up. This is going to be a post request also. Going to be a so I'll come right here and then specify the URL as localhost 5000 slash sign up, and then I'll put in our body. So I'll say the body is going to be JSON. So I'll come back to our code and then I'll copy the various fields as we specified on our sign up model. I'm going to come right here and then put this in. So I'll just paste this. So I'm going to try with different dummy users. So test data. So I'll say user Joanne, and then say that the email of this user is going to be Joanne at company.com, and then I'll say the password is going to be password. So when I send this, so let's hope our server is running. So let me try to run this. Our server is running. So when I send this request, we are getting a 500 internal server error. So we're saying that filter got unexpected keyword argument username. So I'm going to go back to our code. I'll first minimize this. Go back to our sign up route. So we have a query. We're supposed to actually use filter by. So I'll fix that. I'm going to say filter by. When I save, our server is now reloading. So when I come back to our insomnia and try to send this, you see that now our user has been created with the various data. However, we do not want this data to be returned. What we want to return is a simple message creating a user successfully. So let's go back to our code. So I'm going to go back to the code, and where I have at api.marshal with, I'll remove this because what it does is to actually return the newly created user. So I'm going to remove that. And then I'm as well going to remove this new user object that we created. And then instead of that, I'll just say return JSONify. So in this case, I'll say return. So this is going to be return JSONify. And then in this case, I'll just say JSONify. I'll pass in a simple dictionary with a message. This is going to be a user created successfully. So let me try to save and hoping that our server is still running. Go back to our insomnia and try to send this again. So when we sign up with the same user, we see that the user with the username Joanne already exists. Now when I go back and try to change this data, so in this case, let me say Jonah. So try to send this. We see that our user has been created successfully. Now the next thing we're going to do is to actually make use of Flask-JWT-Extended to carry out our JWT authentication. Now using our created user accounts, we can be able to validate and check whether these users exist, and if they exist, we can be able to give them JWT tokens that are going to help us to access the different parts of the application that are protected. To do that, I'm going to come to VS Code. Then within our main.py, I'll just create just come right here where we have our login. And then the first thing I'm going to do is to actually register our app to work with Flask-JWT-Extended. So I need to come to the top of our code. Then I'll import Flask-JWT-Extended. So to do that, I'm just going to come and say from Flask. So this is going to be Flask-JWT Extended. I'm going to import the JWT manager class. And now the next thing is going to be to register our app to work with the JWT manager. So I'll come right here and then say that our JWT manager, and then we pass in our app. So this is going to be our app. Now this is going to make Flask-JWT Extended to work with our app. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to just come and then try to implement the functionality of our logging in. So the first thing we shall have to do is to access the data that comes from every client as JSON. So to do that, we need to create a variable called data, and this is going to be request.get. Oh, sorry for that. So this is going to be request.get JSON. So after doing this, what you shall need to access are the different user attributes from this data, such as the username. So the username will be data.get. This is going to be the username. And then the password will be equal to, so in this case, we shall get the data.get. So this is going to be our password. Now, to get this field working on our Swagger UI, what we shall have to do is to create a model that's going to specify these fields, and then we shall just decorate this function with api.expect that model. To do that, I'm going to pass this for now to prevent a syntax error. So I'll just come right here and create our login model. So I'll create this login model by saying login model is going to be equal to api.model, and then first thing we shall do is to pass in the name of that model, so it's going to be login. And when you come right here, we shall specify the different fields we want for our login. So we want our username. This username is going to be our fields dot string. It's going to be a string, and then our password. So let me change this to a string. It's going to be our password. So our password is also going to be our fields dot string. So hoping I don't have any errors here. So we have created our fields. So we have our login model having two fields, username and password. So let's try to fix that. Don't have any errors, which is fine. So we need to go back this side. So let's try to see login, and then all right. So I'll come back to our login. So I'll come and decorate this with api.expect. Then I'll pass in the login model. So this is going to be login model. So after doing this, the next thing is going to be to use this model to provide us with data, and then we get this data via data. We get the username and the password. So we make a database query querying for the user with this specific username. And if they exist, we also check if their password matches the password hash in our database. To do this, I'm going to just come. I'm just going to come here and say db user is going to be equal to the user dot query dot filter by. In this case, we're going to filter by the username. Then if our username is equal to the username, then we want to get the first object that's having that username. So if that exists, then we have to also check the password. So we're going to say if the user exists, if dp user, then check password hash. So in this case, we're going to say check password hash. This is going to be our check password hash. So we have check password hash. So the first thing is the password hash, and then the password. So we're going to pass in our password. So the first thing is our password hash, which is going to be db user dot. In this case, we're going to say password, since that's what we have on our model. So when we go here, we have that stored in the model field. So when I come, I'll just say password, and then our password, in this case, which is going to be our password. So if I say password, so we're going to go ahead and then give this user who is authenticated a refresh token and an access token. So to do that, I'm going to import two functions from Flask-JWT-Extended. I'll just come right at the top of our code and then say from Flask-JWT-Extended, we're going to import create access token. So this is going to be create access token. And then we're also going to create the refresh token. So I'm going to say create refresh token. I'll come down to our login route, then say our access token is going to be equal to create access token. Then we always have to pass in an identity. This access token is always signed and always hides the identity of a user who it belongs to. For example, if we created an access token, it hides the identity of a user who that token belongs to within that token. So in this case, we are going to provide the identity of the user as the db user dot username. And then we are also going to create our refresh token. And then this is going to be create refresh token. So let's try to fix this. This is actually create refresh token. So I'm going to come down this side. So this is going to be create refresh token. And then we're also going to give it an identity of db user dot username. After this is done, we are going to return this in our JSON. So I'll say return. So we're going to say return JSONify, and then here we're going to have a message. So our message is going to be, actually in this case we're going to just have our access token. So I'll say access token. This is going to be access token. Then we're going to also have a refresh token. Actually, let me just call this refresh token and then access token. So our refresh token will be our refresh token. So hoping that everything is working, I'm going to save this and then go back to Insomnia. So I'll create a new request, which I'm going to call the login request. It's going to be a post method. So I'm going to create this request and then the body, just come here and provide a username. So the username is going to be John. So let's say the password is going to be password. So didn't specify the URL. So let's say localhost 5000 slash login. So when you send this, can't connect to the server. So let's try login model is non-defined. So let's try to wonder why I mistake this. So this has to be a model with an E. So let me try to fix this. So this is going to be a model with an E, just like we see right here. Let me save. So when I run this, I'm going to send this request to login. So we see that it has created an access token as well as a refresh token. So let's go ahead and try to protect the different routes for our application. So to do this, we are going to come, we're going to protect our routes. So we're going to decorate these routes with a special decorator called the JWT required decorator. We're going to go ahead and import that from Flask-JWT-Extended. So we're going to import JWT required. After doing this, I'll come just down to every protected route that I may want to protect. So I may leave this getting all recipes route protected, and then I may protect routes such as updating a recipe. So to do that, I will just come right here and then I say at JWT required. So this protects that route. And then I also go ahead and protect the route for deleting a recipe. So I'll say at JWT required. And then after that, I'll also protect other routes such as that for creating a recipe. So I may say this is going to be, so I may protect this and say at API but actually this is going to be a JWT required. So this is going to be JWT required. So after doing this, I am going to save, and when you try to access these routes, let's try to access these routes. So let's say I'm trying to access get a recipe. So when I send this, create a recipe, which is a protected route, we see that we are missing an authorization header. So the way we access these routes is by passing in our authorization header that's going to be a bearer token. So to do this, I may come within our within our headers and then come and specify a header. So this will be an authorization header. And then the value, we may provide the value as bearer and then space, then the token. So you need to go ahead and copy the access token in this case. Just come and copy the access token. After copying this access token, I'll just come to our create recipe headers and then say bearer, then token. I'm going to send this, and then you see that we have been able to successfully create a recipe. Now this applies to all the different routes. So we just pass in the authorization header as bearer, then the token that we use as our access token. So in this video, we've been able to create our login and sign up functionality. We've implemented JWT authentication in this case. This has been a long video, and if you learned from this video, please go ahead and leave a like. And also don't forget to subscribe if you're new to this channel, as we shall be creating projects like this. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next video. Bye.